Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Tim Cyclesman Wood, editor of Cycles News and Views on Cyclesman.com. Welcome back to the show, Tim.
Jim, as always, thanks for having me.
And you have that international cold that's going around with the tickly throat, so we'll try to keep things short and sweet for you today. Tim,
God, I do.
Tim, crude oil is still bouncing around the $50 mark. We thought it would probably have corrected by now. What's happening with crude?
Well, I think it is going to correct. We had the rally into the end of September, and then it broke a little bit, went down to about, I guess, right at $49 mark, and then on Tuesday, we saw it pop a little bit. It was up again yesterday, and then, it's off today. I think that this is a counter-trend advance still. I mean, the evidence with commodities still tell me that we should have lower prices ahead in commodities. True enough, it's hanging on, and, we've seen this additional bounce, but I do think, there's nothing that's changed with commodities overall. And I do think that, it's a counter-trend bounce and that lower prices with crude oil and gasoline and so forth are ahead.
Traditionally, gasoline prices and oil prices go down after the so-called driving season is ended. But here we are in October, and the prices have stayed high. Is that kind of a shock or just something interesting?
Well, it is unusual. You are exactly right. I mean, typically you see, lows late in the year or early in the year. When I say late, early, winter to, or, early spring type thing. And then you see, seasonal highs, May, June, July, August type thing. And so, yes, the fact that it's holding up is somewhat, counter-cyclical, if you will. But then looking at, the overall cycle itself, I do think, like I said, that it's counter-trend. So yes, it's a bit unusual, but it hasn't. Looking at the structure, when I say structure, the degree of the structure, looking at, the short, intermediate, and longer term cycles and the structure of those cycles, I do think, like I said, that it's still counter trend. And so, that's not talking out of both sides of my mouth. Yes, it's a little unusual that it's held on as well as it has in this time of year, but it hasn't, like I said, it hasn't broken the structure. So I still think that at this point, at least, that the outcome or the expectation, I should say, is still for lower prices.
Middle Eastern oil producers apparently have asked U.S. shale producers to cut back to keep prices high. Do you think they'll have any effect on American independent producers?
I don't think, I think the market is the market when it comes by and large to commodities. And I just don't see how, OPEC will make an announcement or whatever. And it seems like the cycles do pretty much what the cycles do. In looking at, the oil service sector today, I just pulled up a chart as we're talking. We saw the same counter-trend bounce in the oil service sector, and it looks like it's trying to roll over. And so I don't think it matters, is what I'm saying. I think that, we got lower prices in commodities in general, and particularly in crude oil.
We'll have more with Tim Cyclesman Wood right after the break.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the US. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the US and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Tim Cycles Van Wood. Tim, what's happening with gold right now, and what do you see is going to happen in the short term?
Same thing. We had the intermediate term advance coming out of the July low, pushed into early September, and then we finally got the break down into last week, and then on Tuesday we saw a bounce, a nice bounce. Just like we did with crude oil. And it's interesting. Well, not to me. I mean, it's expected, but it bounced together with crude oil. And if you look at silver, the same thing. And so we had a bounce. It was an anticipated bounce in the metals, in that we were at what I call a little trading cycle low, and up it went. Well, now I think that it's only been a couple days. I looked before we came on the air. Gold is off a little bit. Silver's already at overbought levels. I suspect that again it's counter trend, and that the downside continues there as well.
Should a person wait to buy gold then, hoping that the price comes down a bit?
Yes, I maintain that 9-year cycle thing, like I've talked about all along. I don't know. If you go looking at the statistics, the 9-year cycle low still lies ahead, and we've talked about that. There's so far the low point in gold was the December 15 low, and then we had a little bit higher intermediate degree low in January of 16. But it was too early. Both of those lows were too early to have marked a 9-year low. Now, does that mean that we didn't have the 9-year low? No. It means, there's a first time for everything. And I've learned in this business, never say never. But statistically, let me say that another way. The statistic is whole in that 9-year cycle has always consisted of 9 of these little, lower degree intermediate term cycles, if you will. And the low point so far, like I said, was the December 15 low, and that was just cycle number 7. So looking at that statistic and knowing that it's whole, and looking at the overall structure of gold and silver, again, nothing is broken yet to tell me that we should not be on track with that lower low ahead. And so until we get to that 9th cycle, that wash out into that 9th cycle, whether it makes a lower low below the 15 low, which it should, but whether it does or whether it doesn't, we need to get to that 9th cycle. And I still think that's ahead of us. Later this year, and we're running out of year, I granted, but later this year to early next, sometime toward, like I said, December, possibly January type time frame is looking like. I'm looking for that final washout in the metals, and it should take the commodity complex with it. So until we get evidence that has changed, then that expectation stands. And like I said, whether it takes us to a new low in gold or not, then I think that is the buy point, because it'll get us over the hurdle of having that 9th cycle behind us. And so we can, you can address it with confidence that, okay, now we know, here we are. But right now, like I said, the risk is still to the downside with, fulfilling that statistic and that intermediate term cycle down, which, like I said, it peaked in September. So, yeah, counter trend bounce, and I think we go lower.
Of course, a lot of people say when there's geopolitical problems, such as North Korea and their atomic missile threat, it should drive the price of gold up, but it hasn't. Is it because of the 9-year cycle? It just naturally wants to go down?
That's my view. Yes. And by the contrary, whenever the 9-year cycle low is in place, then it's going to naturally want to go up, and there'll be some fundamental event that will get tagged for the reason. I've seen this time and time again. And, the first time I observed this, I was just getting into, technical analysis and looking at the markets, and I had this older guy that was kind of coaching me and showing me stuff, and I identified, a cycle low in soybeans. Well, back then, things change in that what's trendy and what people look at, what matters and what doesn't. But back then, the Russian soybean market was a big deal. It affected the soybean market in the U.S. And I remember what they call a annual or seasonal cycle low had bottomed, and identified that bottom. And lo and behold, Chernobyl happened, and up goes the cycle. The same thing with crude oil in 91 or 90, whenever the Gulf War was. I forget now, 90 or 91. I think it was 91. Saw a major cycle bottom occur there, and then up it goes. And I see something kind of similar to that here with another market in particular is the dollar. Everybody has been so bloody bearish on the dollar, but I think the dollar has made a major, major low here. Now, I say that, let me explain. There was a major clustering of lows, and it's still in the making. The dollar's not completely out of the woods yet, but I think odds suggest that we probably have seen that clustering of lows. Now, what does the dollar do with that opportunity? Does it fail, or does it capitalize on it? Well, I think it's going to capitalize on it, but again, you look at the structure as time progresses, and you go, yep, it's still positive, so your expectation stands, and, the dollar goes up, or it doesn't. So, I think we're in a position here where the dollar either fails big, or rallies big. And the point is that we had this clustering of cycles, and whether it gets a toehold or whether it doesn't, whichever the case is, rally big or fail big, there'll be some news come out, and they say that, well, the dollar's up because of whatever. No, we had a major low. The news just hasn't affected, it hasn't surfaced yet. There's something there. And it's the same thing I think it's the exact same thing on a grander scale with equities. I've talked to, this equity market is the craziest thing I've ever seen. I think any of us has ever seen, because hell, it is the craziest thing period. There's no bubble like it. Looking at some of John Hussman's work, he's showing valuations that are, it's the biggest bubble ever, which is, what I've been saying. He's showing that based on some of his valuation work. I talked to my friend, excuse me for the cough, guys. I'm sorry, I got this cold. I've talked to my old friend, Peter Elides. Peter's in his 70s. He's been doing this for 50 years or more. And obviously, he's never seen anything like this in his lifetime, but he's a wise guy. And, it's just, it is what it is. It's a massive bubble. And, it's going to continue until, it doesn't, until we finally get a setup to cap it. We'll try to get something and it'll fall apart. And we'll try to get something, we had it out there in non-confirmation. Well, it fell apart, several weeks ago. And, I think we talked about that last time we did an interview. And even some of my intermediate term, advanced decline line stuff fell apart. And then this thing has just been relentlessly up. But at some point it will set up, and then the news is going to hit, and, the bubble is going to deflate, and in a big way. But anyway, I digress. I forgot where we were even, talking about,
the value
cycle
of the U.S. dollar. Well, also something, Tim, I learned from my correspondent in Japan, James Corbett, that China is pressuring Saudi Arabia to sell them oil in yuan instead of U.S. dollars. Will that affect the value of the U.S. buck?
No, but it could affect their well-being. Every time that happens, the U.S. defends that dollar. So I say that jokingly, but seriously, that's a serious thing. I don't know. That's dangerous for a company to want to try to trade oil, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, that's a serious thing.
Well, two countries that tried to trade oil for something else than U.S. dollars, Iraq and Libya, seem to have had a little bit of intervention.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And, China they try the same thing, things can happen. So, if I was a leader of a country, I wouldn't do it. It didn't work out too well for Gaddafi or Hussein.
We'll have more with Tim Cyclesman Wood right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Ridout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork will commence later this year. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're chatting with Tim Cyclesman Wood. Tim, what do you see happening to the equity markets over the next few weeks?
Well, it's just, like I said, it's just more of the same extreme. And bottom line is, until we get a Dow theory primary bearish trend change, this can go on and on and on. And it has. It's the same old song and dance. I know people are tired of hearing, but it is what it is. I can't change it. You can't change it. None of us can change it. It simply is what it is. The fact that these old school technicians see the same thing, and it doesn't matter who you talk to. I even recently, I very seldom listen to other interviews and that sort of thing, but out of curiosity, I listened to some stuff from Dr. Mark Farber and, my mind just went blank. What's the other guy's name? Jim Rogers. And Bruce Stratton. I talked to Bruce. It's been a little while since I talked to Bruce Stratton, but the guy that runs Safe Haven, he's an old school technician. And all these people see this. Peter Leides, I've talked to Peter a couple of times this week with some stuff that he's looking at. And, again, I'm not making excuses. It is what it is. But all these people, years and years of wisdom. And, I learned Dow theory from Richard Russell and the cycles work from Walter Bressert. And, it's not that the disciplines don't work or the technical analysis is no longer valid, that kind of thing. It goes to show how extreme this bubble is. And the conclusion with all of these people is that not only is it the most extreme bubble ever, but it's a bubble pretty much in everything. And I think the consequences are going to be harsh. But we need to see the proper setup. We'll get little cracks in the foundation with the Dow theory non-confirmation. We'll get cracks in the foundation with, one or two of the DNA markers with, for example, my intermediate term advanced decline line non-confirmation. Well, there's been a non-confirmation at every 4-year cycle top since the inception of that data in 1926. My ED data goes back to 26. And we'll see it set up and then it'll morph away. Well, I can't control that, neither can anyone else. And so until we get a setup that solidifies, and the solidifying factor is a Dow theory primary bearish trend change. And I've even been asked this. People have asked me, they say, well, is it possible that the market could be manipulated to where they could, blow these technical setups out and blow out the Dow theory non-confirmation and blow out, and I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe they can. Maybe there is that degree of control. So let's just assume for a minute that there is. And if there is, that's fine. Blow them out. But here's the one thing I can assure you, as sure as the sun goes down in the evening and comes up in the morning. This is a fact. It's not debatable. It is a hardcore fact. The Dow theory primary bearish trend change will not and cannot be negated. When the bubble bursts, that has to happen. And so, like I've said all along, even though the can keeps getting kicked down the road, the key, at the end of the day, as they say, the key is the primary bearish trend change. And that hasn't happened yet. So, until that happens, we may see a crack here and a crack there. Is it a bubble? Damn right it is. But, we got to see that to cap it. So there you go.
And Tim, you mentioned Mark Faber as we were speaking. He's my featured guest on This Week in Money on Roundhouse Radio in Vancouver at 8 o'clock Saturday morning, and also on TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
Awesome. I would love to do. You know what you ought to do? Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
This would be an awesome thing. Peter Elides and I are going. We're not going to do it yet. We're going to wait, but we're going to do a little interview with Hussman. We're going to try to get John Hussman on, and then he and I are going to do an interview on my site. Just a suggestion or maybe a request, if you will. Why don't you do a round table? I would love to do a round table with like Farber and a couple of the people and everybody compare their disciplines and let's talk about what we all see individually and compare notes.
Tim, that'd be a great show. One of the problems with Mr. Farber or Dr. Faber is that he's in Thailand, and trying to find a clean phone line out of that place is really tough. It took us weeks to finally get that one up and going.
I'll have to definitely listen to that interview. I like the guy. All these older technicians, they are you definitely need to listen to them, and that was just a thought, a round table. We did that. Richard Russell and Bob Prechter and Peter Elides and I did one going into the 2007 top talking about it, and it was a really good interview.
Tim, it's a great idea. We'll try to do our best.
Thank you.
My guest has been Tim Cyclesman Wood, editor of Cycles News and Views, which you can find on cyclesman.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.